Hello. Today is Thursday of the 23rd week in Ordinary Time. Um, as I presume you've already learned that the staff here at St. Charles is reflecting on each of our experience in retrospect of September 11th um, as a person of faith, as a member of the staff, and so I want to begin with just real briefly reading part of the first reading from today's daily readings because it's so appropriate for today, for the week. Brothers and sisters, put on as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If one has a grievance against another, as the Lord has forgiven you, you must also do. I think about some of the things that were and continue to be the big, not to minimize it, but the catchphrases of September 11th and ones we hear even to some extent today with the pandemic, of the idea of today it's, well, no one will ever forget where they were during this experience of the past year and a half, and never forget was on people's lips. It was on the back of people's cars and signs and ribbons and I think about that as a person of faith and have to ask myself, never forget what? Never forget the horrendous event, the horrific images we saw of an attack and of people, the lives that were lost, and sure, I understand the idea of we never want to forget that, but I also have a hard time understanding how that doesn't bring me a lot more than fear and suspicion, and to me as a person of faith, I want to be drawn to something more, and I think about that again into our context of today and what the last year and a half have been, that one of the things you hear over and over again, the catchphrase of today is about getting back to normal. And I think of September 11th, and I was, I don't know, maybe 20, 21 years old. I was a student at St. Joseph's University, and as Kathy shared with us on Tuesday, this was a time that the students I work with really can't wrap their heads around, but where texting and even email were not heavily relied on. I think if I sent a text, it cost me 10 cents. It wasn't something we really, and yet people showed up at St. Charles. I wasn't there yet, but I know the stories. I know how people called and people came, and I'm sure there were a lot of people who didn't call and didn't know. They just knew that something really big has happened, and I need to be with the Catholic community of St. Charles. That I need something bigger than me in this moment. And as a student at St. Joseph's, I didn't know where to go. So I went to campus ministry, where I found, a dozen students or so sitting around a television and learning and all that, but quickly organizing to how can we pray, how can we sit and support one another in this unprecedented time and horrendous experience. But the memory I have as a person of faith is that sense of community and that sense of being a part of and that draw to my faith. And that's been that has certainly been the last year and a half, is that when I remember 20 years from now, the past year and a half, I'll remember where my family was, during the lockdown and weeks and months following that, where we weren't back in our church yet. And while I may have been, we may have been deprived of the Eucharist, I'll remember, and I'll never forget, sitting on the top of a hill at the Willows is one of the places where we decided, we got to go to Mass, and in an intentional way, where we would go sit down at the top of this big hill where we saw forests and we saw rolling hills, and we were all alone, and we could just sit there on my phone, watch Father Greg and whichever member of the staff, and the beautiful experience of liturgy that Tim Keys helped make possible, with my arms around my kids, and what a wonderful memory. Were the times where it was here in the house, because we couldn't celebrate my oldest son's first Holy Communion, so we went to Mass, and he put on his first Holy Communion suit, and everyone else wanted to dress. We're all dressed up, and we're here for Father Greg up on the TV, and that the call and the experience that we as people of faith, and I don't mean to minimize the horrendous experience of September 11th and the challenges of the past year and a half. Where I'm drawn to as a person of faith, as our reading suggests, is compassion, is kindness, humility, especially humility, to be aware of someone else's experience of life, gentleness and patience and forgiveness, and for me as a person of faith, looking back 20 years ago to the experience of September 11th, that's where I want to be. I want to remember all the experiences as a person of faith, that despite the tremendous sense of fear and anxiety that was all around us at the time, I remember the people who represent my faith, the people who I was drawn to, the sense of community and togetherness that was also very much kind of a thread throughout that experience. And for that, I'm always eternally grateful. I hope all of you are well. And for many of us, that may be this week. My oldest brother, was in the American Stock Exchange on September 11th, and I know this is a day that will probably forever be tremendously painful and bring up, almost re-traumatize. And I hope that if you are someone who lost a loved one, or were near the towers, I hope that today is a day, and this week is a day where you are even closer to our faith, even closer to God, intimately and tied to our faith community. And with that, I wish you well, and we'll see you soon.